Well, it's Labor Day. Labor Day weekend. Every morning in Africa, a gazelle wakes up and knows that it must run faster than the slowest lion or face becoming its next meal. And every morning, the lion wakes up knowing that it must run faster than the slowest gazelle or face starvation. Either way, one thing is true for the both of them, and that is when the sun comes up, they better both be running. And of course, with this Labor Day weekend beginning this Tuesday morning, many of us will either feel like the lion, and some of us will feel like the gazelle. But whichever it is, the truth is the same for you and I. Come Tuesday morning, we're all going to be running. Labor Day marks the end of the summer. It's the end of rest. It's the end of sleeping in. For many, it's the end of sanity. I mean, the only good thing about it is, come Tuesday morning, the kids go back to school. And we're all happy about that. It's quite a thing, you know, in our society, what a busy pace that we keep. I don't know about you, but I find it interesting that the common colloquial phrases that we will use when we greet one another nowadays is, how's it going, or how are you? And how the typical response has perhaps modified or changed over the years, that now when somebody says, how are you doing, or how are things, most common answers are busy, hectic, life is crazy, going, all of these things. We laugh at this thing called the 40-hour work week. Many of us exceeding that to 50 or 60 hours sometime with extra shifts and overtime. Technology now allowing us to work not just at our workplace, but now we can work in coffee shops, we can work from our cars, we can work on holidays, we can work from the bedroom. And how many of us would at least admit that on one or two occasions you've even read the odd email in the bathroom? And after a while we find ourselves, or hopefully we find ourselves saying, what's it all for? What's it good for? I love the writer of Ecclesiastes. He has so profound way of simplifying life for us. And he says in chapter 2, I hated my life because of the work that is done under the soil became grievous to me. I hated the things that I toiled for under the sun. And my heart began to despair over toilsome labor. Now I hope that you don't feel like that all the time. But how many know that there are many times when life just becomes very wearisome? And we're just feeling overworked and tired and burned out, and I'm just not sure that I can keep going or that I want to keep going. And with whatever time is left over, we cram it up with our social calendar, the volunteer work that we do in various organizations, or time that we would give to the church, or programs or things that we'll take advantage of. And there's all kinds of things that we offer here at Gateway, work around the home, and of course, the biggest part of our lives, for those of you who are in that age bracket, the biggest part of our lives after work and all of these curricular activities is driving our children around to the various activities that they're involved in. And why? The reason why is because it's important for us to teach our children to follow in our footsteps, because we want them to live that same overcapacitated, marginless lives that we live. We want them to grow up to become just like us. Don't get me wrong. I believe in hard work. I believe in being productive. I believe that we need to teach our children a strong work ethic. The Bible's clear that if a man does not work, he should not eat. Proverbs has strong language regarding a lazy person, often referring to them as a sluggard. And while work might be a four-letter word, God never intended it to be a curse word. In fact, when he put Adam in the garden, he told him to be creative. He said, Adam, I want you to enjoy this place that I have created for you. I want you to be creative in it. I want you to have dominion over it. I want you to be productive in it. We only got this thing called thistles and sweat because of sin. But it was never God's original intention, never God's design for us to be so tired or worn out or not liking work or working too much or not earning enough or always feeling that angst that things are just not the way they're supposed to be. That's a result of sin. And I want us to pause today. This is not a profound message today. I'm not going to share with you things that you've never heard before, but rather what I want us to do on this Labor Day weekend is I'm inviting you to pause with me to look at our values, our priorities, and just to examine where we are in terms of how we articulate and live out the workplace in our lives. So that if we do not pause, by the time we come to Tuesday morning, it will just kind of take over us. The few writings in the Bible that so clearly describe our lives in Ecclesiastes, at the end of the day, for this writer, work and life had become meaningless. He had somehow lost touch with or forgotten why he did what he did. And he describes it as a chasing after the wind. And that's one of my fears for you. And one of the things that I want to challenge you today, that if you don't pause before Labor Day comes to its close and this new year, if you would, this new work year, if you would, begins, that if you're not careful in examining where you're at, it can become very quickly a chasing after the wind. We find ourselves so frustrated trying to do the most amount of things in the least amount of time. And when we are interrupted, we get so frustrated and we get angry. And we find ourselves always angry and wondering why sometimes you wake up in the morning and you've been clenching your teeth. And we're prone to road rage. And we find ourselves being critical of others in the workplace. And we're spreading ourselves thin. We're marching to the tune of somebody else who's demanding us to do this and that. And when we do find time to take a break, we find ourselves even guilt-laden. We don't want to take that break because we feel bad because we somehow gave ourselves a break. And I'm not sure that I'm going to fix any of that for you today. In reality, that's up to you. Because consciously or unconsciously, you set your priorities, but after a few years, your priorities set you. And I would suggest that almost all of us in this room have our own set of priorities, but also we have our own set of habits and routines. And while summer is a time where we kind of take a break from those realities, what's going to happen on Tuesday is we're very quickly going to go back into whatever those patterns and habits are. And all I'm advocating today is that if you don't take some time to pause, adjust, and ask some healthy questions, you'll be right back at it, and before you know it, this year will be gone. The challenge, of course, is that while we are young adults and while we are growing up, while we have aspirations as teenagers and emerging into our 20s, we have this desire, this hope that someday things will be different. We get into those 30s and we know, and I was actually just talking to somebody during the handshaking time, greeting time, talking about multiple kids and how right now, he actually said, right now our lives are hell, as he described it. But he says, I know it'll be short-lived. And it's like, wow, that sometimes life can be so overwhelming that we would actually use those articulations that it feels like hell to us. I mean, you've all been there, so don't pretend that you haven't had those feelings and that angst. And we pursue the month after month, the year after year with this dream or this ideal that one day it will be different. One day it'll settle down. I'm working really hard on the front end now, but one day I'm going to achieve this platform or this level, or I'm going to get to this place, and then it'll settle down, and then I'm going to have more time, and then I'll have more time with my family, and then you know what, I'm not going to have to strive as much because I'll have the money that I've been after, and I'll reach that financial bracket. But does it ever get there? You can be chasing after it like the wind in its 30s, and then all of a sudden it's your 40s, and you're still chasing, you're still running, and then it's into your 50s, and all of a sudden now you're coming to the end of the race, and you're going, I don't even know what I was chasing after. It's the wind. So on Labor Day we pause and we ask why. And it comes down to some of the motivations, and sometimes I don't even know how it happens sometimes, but we adapt some motivations for our work. We adapt some motivations for our lives that are clearly unhealthy, and yet we don't even know how they got there in the first place. Things like fear. We find ourselves going to work because we're afraid we're never going to have enough. And we're just constantly going after because we're not sure we're going to have enough. And you know what? No matter how many financial experts I talk to, no matter how much financial planning, and no disrespect to the wizards in the room that are in that industry, no one seems to be able to tell you how much is enough. No one seems to be able to tell you when will I get there? Whatever there is. Are you with me today? You know what I'm talking about? I'm 51 years old and I still don't know if I'm there yet. When will I get to there? When will I know that I've gotten to there? And there's this driving thing. The boomers bought into this lie of Freedom 55. And that Freedom 55, it came and it went, and now we're 65 and we're still working, and we still don't know whether we're there yet. It's chasing after the wind. Or lust. We're driven by lust. We just want too much. And we don't start off that way, do we? We start that way. We start off with great aspirations because we want to provide, especially men in the room. We want to provide those things, that extra things. And so we work overtime and we work extra because we're wanting to provide those things. And we convince ourselves that the things that we want are really actually needs. And we use phrases like, well, I want to bless my family. And so I'm working hard and I'm going this extra mile and I'm taking this extra time and I'm working these extra weekends because I want to make sure that I bless my family. Well, maybe to pause this weekend and say, maybe they're already blessed. Maybe another house, another car, another vacation, another soccer weekend or another sporting event or another concert or another new set of clothing. Maybe that's not the blessing they need. Just saying. Maybe in our desire to bless, we overbless. Can you bless too much, Mom and Dad? All I'm asking for you to do is to pause and ask the question. That we want it too fast. Not only do we often are driven by wanting the wrong things, but sometimes we want them too fast. Or a wrongly placed identity. We want them all for all the wrong reasons. Men are worse for this. I mean, you take a bunch of men that don't know each other, put them strangers, put them in a room, tell them to get to know one another, and what are the men going to do? They're going to mill around the room and they're going to ask only one question. What is it? What do you do? And ladies, just in case you were wondering, that's not actually an inquisitive thing in terms of a friendly thing. They're not really not that interested. What they're doing is that they're establishing pecking orders. They really don't care about the other individual, and they're really not that interested in getting to know them. When they say, what is it you do for a living, that's so that they can establish a pecking order, say, he's above me and I'm above him. Okay, it's no different than when we were in the schoolyard, when we were in grade 8, and we were wondering who could take who in a fist fight. We're doing the same thing. We categorize, we put them, you're in this financial bracket, you're in this position, you're in this much power, you have that much place, you're here, I'm over you, you're under me. We do all of this stuff. It's wrongly placed identity. We identify ourselves by what we do. So what are we missing? Well, I want to remind us today of some very simple things. And the first thing is this. We need to understand that there is a limitation to our days. You're not going to live forever. Young moms and dads, before work takes over, before life takes over, I want to encourage you got to slow it down. Because you don't know how much time you've got left on this earth. And we all like to think that we're going to live forever. And all of a sudden your whole world changed with one phone call, one traffic light, one letter that comes in the mail. And something happens. And everything that you've been chasing after becomes wind. And the job is gone, the security is gone, the money is gone, and the stuff you wanted doesn't matter. No one talks about it. Because in just a moment of time, God teaches the limitation of our days because we get so busy doing all the things, maybe for all the right reasons, but we're doing all the wrong things. And all of a sudden we wake up one morning and we realize, if I could do any one thing, it wouldn't be to have more money. When I look at my life now, and I'm only 51 years old, and for some of you who are younger, you're going, oh, he's 51 years old. But whatever that age is for you, the reality is if I could press rewind, if I could go back, if I could wave a magic wand and have anything, it would not be more money. It would not be a bigger church. It would not be more prestige. It would not be more power. It would not be any of those things. If I could do any one more thing, I'd like to go back and have more time with my girls. I'd like to have an extra day at the beach. like to have a few more hours where I drove them to school again. I'd like to have a few more bedtime cuddles with Cheryl and the girls. But you know what I'm saying? God teaches the limitation of our days, because you're not going to live forever. And all I'm trying to get you to do is just slow down and to ask yourself before Tuesday hits you and say, am I going too fast? Because by Tuesday, you're not going to shut it off. The limitation of our gifts. You can't do everything. Oh, we teach our children, we tell our children, there's nothing you cannot do. You can do anything you want to do. You're wrong. There's a lot of things you cannot do. And we have created, we are continually perpetuating this self-entitled generation that they can have it all, that they can be it all, that they can receive it all, that it's all theirs. And it's not true. It's just not true. You're not going to be able to do everything that you want to do in life. And it's okay, moms and dads, to say no. And moms, it's okay to turn to your husbands and say no. And husbands, it's okay to turn to your wife and say no. We can't have it all. Our resources, very similar to our gifts. You know what? We're just not going to have the finances to be able to do everything that you want to do. And again, all I'm advocating for is at this moment where you just sit down and say, okay, maybe we're living past our margin. Maybe you'd have a whole lot more time if you brought the pursuit to be underneath the income generation and not above the income generation. Am I making sense here today? Like I said, it's not profound, but it has a profound effect on our lives. For some of you, if you just were to pull down the expenses or pull down the expectation to be under the income generation, your life would just smooth right out and you go, wow, I got more time in the world because I don't need to work the overtime. I don't need to work all the extra time. Teach us the limitation of our relationships. You're just not going to please everybody. Especially in the workplace, man, if you find yourself and you know what, it starts off with vain praise and you're working hard and the boss says, that's a great job and I really appreciate what you're doing and or you're self-employed and so you've bought into this, so you know what, I got to build a company, got to build a company, got to build a company. And you get driven by all of these things and the boss says, you know what, you're doing an awesome job. Let's just tweak that a little bit higher. Let's just pull that notch up about another notch or two. You know what, you made your goals. Let's see if we can get your goals just a little bit higher, 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 just a little bit higher. They don't care about you. You know what a little bit higher means? A little bit more money for the company. Right? I'm not talking about excellence. I'm not talking about your pursuits. But I am suggesting that if you're, dancing to the beat of somebody else's drum, you can get driven by trying to please everybody, trying to make everybody happy in your life. And your kids are wanting this, and they're wanting that, and they're wanting this, and you want to please them, and your spouse is after these things, and you want to have all these things. But the reality is you just cannot make everybody happy in your life. And if you try, you're burning yourself out. We damage the relationships. And the very people that we're doing all of these things for, we're hurting those that we love the most. And we're damaging our physical health. And we're having heart attacks and obesity because we're not taking care of ourselves. We're not exercising and headaches and high blood pressure. And as we get older, these things begin to take a toll. And the medical world has done a good job in allowing us to live longer. But the goal isn't to live longer anymore. Nowadays, the goal is to live better. We know we're going to live to 80 or 90 years old. It's how well are we going to live when we're 80 or 90 years old? The reality is this: if you don't take care of yourself now, 80 is going to come and you're going to wish you're dead. You just won't be able to stop. And we damage our spiritual health. When you live a marginless life and you edge out your time with Christ, because, and again, I appreciate 5-minute devotions, okay? I appreciate all of the little Bible apps. We have them here at Gateway, so I'm not just But you don't develop a deep relationship with Jesus in 5 minutes. Spiritual depth takes time. And sometimes we want instant Jesus, instant spirituality, instant growth, instant Bible knowledge, instant prayer life, instant this, and we want it real fast. And you know what? I want to get really close to Jesus, and I want to do it in 30 days or less. It doesn't work that way. Spiritual depth takes a lot of time. It takes years of discipline and practice. It means hours with God. Now you can give hours with God, or you can give hours with NBC, or hours on a soccer field, or hours at the gym, or hours at a workstation. All I'm pushing you to do is to ask myself, am I spending enough time so as to develop a spiritual depth, and think that and naively fool yourself into thinking that 25 minutes on a Sunday morning here is enough. Oh my goodness, we don't dare try here to provide for you the spiritual depth that's required for you to live a life of excellence in 75-minute service on a Sunday morning. If you think that's what we're trying to do, you're crazy, and we're naive for even trying to think that that would happen, because it's not gonna. Spiritual depth takes time. Relationships take time. Moms and dads, your kids get older and say, oh, they're getting older now, so they don't need as much of us. Lie. The older your kids get, the more time they need. And the problem is, I got a youth pastor here who's going, amen. And let me tell you, the problem is the more time they need with you, the older they get. And I can promise you this is in direct proportion to the worst times that you're available. Because they're not going to open up to you at 8 o'clock in the morning. They don't even speak English at 8 o'clock in the morning. All right? Their school will testify to that. They don't even start to speak English until what, 10:30, 11 o'clock? After lunch? They want to talk to you at 12:30. That's when they want to meet with you. 12:30 at night. And if you got to get up in the morning because you got to get back to work because you're chasing after the wrong wind, it's chasing after the wind. Spiritual life, our relationship life, our physical life, they take time and depth. So what I'm wanting you to do is I'm wanting you to take some time tomorrow. Tomorrow's Labor Day weekend. It's Monday, everything's closed, you can't shop anyways. So what I would like you to do, I just want to encourage you to do this. I want you to take some time this weekend by yourself, together as a couple, and also as a family. And it's up to you, you got to do this. But I want you to take some time on Monday and spend some time with the people that are most important in your life, and ask yourselves this: what is our fall going to look like? And maybe it means establishing some fences and saying, you know what, we need to put some fences up here. Because you know what, last year we let this and this happen, and by the time spring came around, I was ready to bang my head against the wall. Well, what makes you think you're not going to be banging your head against the wall this Christmas? Put a fence up. Draw a boundary. Say no. And start to say, you know what? This is what our family's going to, this is what our marriage is going to be. We didn't put enough, we were at each other, and why was my husband and wife, why have we been fighting for the last 6 months or the last year? Why we had all these problems? Because you didn't make any time for each other. Parents with young kids, let them cry. It's good for the tear ducts. Get them a babysitter. Get out for a date, even if it's Tim Hortons and a donut. But again, put some fences up, put some boundaries up. Be realistic in the expectations. When you sit down and say, you know what is it that we can expect? Because there's nothing worse than having these grandiose expectations and there's no way you can match them. Establishing right priorities. And I'll tell you this, and again, if you don't set the priorities, what happens is life sets the priorities. But I can promise you this, when life sets the priorities, life will set the priorities backwards. Because you're either following a Christ culture or a world culture. And so if you don't have a Christ culture in your family, in your marriage, in your relationships, where the priority is God first, then your marriage, then your children, then others, and then your workplace, if you don't have those priorities established and worked out in a very clear manner, then what happens is this world culture takes over and will always be backwards. Always be backwards. Ask yourself when you're going to chill. And I'm not talking about saving up all the money so that you can take your kids to Disney World and drop 10 grand. That's not what I'm talking about. They don't need another trip to Disney World. Nothing wrong with Disney World. I like Mickey Mouse. I'm into that. I'm talking about carving out chill time. Carving out time that says, you know what? I'm going to just read a book. Now again, that's as opposed to, there's this phrase that I hate to hear, me time. Okay, I'm not talking about an act of selfishness. I am talking about looking at a realistic picture of your calendar and saying, what can I carve out that I will have time when my kids want to talk? I will have time when my husband and I want to sit down and be with one another. I have time to read the book that I've been only wanting to read. So that I actually will lay it out. And for some of you, you have to calendar it in. I do. I calendar in all my chill time. People say, well, can I meet you this day? No. Well, who do you have an appointment with? I don't want to tell them. I'll just say I have an appointment. What they don't know is appointments with me. But in order for me, and I say this to all my staff, in order for us to be at 100%, that means that you have to carve out time so that you can refresh yourself. If you don't carve out time for prayer and devotions, if you don't carve out time for yourself, what makes you think anybody else will? Be thankful. I want you to take some time this weekend, and I want you to sit down with your family and your spouse, your relationships, and say, what am I thankful for? Because you're never going to lower the drive and the finances and the overtime and the extra time and the burning yourself out and spinning your wheels for all the things that you think you need to have, but you don't need to have, if you don't pause to be thankful. You'd be amazed at how you would become less driven to work if you could just take a stock of what you already have and say, you know what, I'm really grateful for this. Like, there's nothing wrong with just actually, I try to do this all the time. I walk from home, I just love my home. I love my home, love my home, love my home. I love my bedroom, I love my home, I love my backyard. Like, I love all those things, and I'm very appreciative of those things. You know what, I love my car. It's a 1999 Solera, but you know what? I hardly ever have to repair it. Gets me to point A and point B. The air conditioning is cold. I love my car. I don't need another car. I own my car. I don't make any payments on my car. And again, I'm not saying you shouldn't have a nice car, okay? If I could have a paid-off Beamer, I would. What I'm saying is that if you're driven to spend and you're driven to have stuff and you're driven and you're justifying going to work for more and more and more and more, the only way you stop that is by pausing and saying, I'm so happy with what I got. Thank you, Jesus, for what I have. I'm so grateful. And out of gratitude comes contentment. I don't need any more clothes. I got a closet full. And out of that, you'll back it down. You'll back it down. I'm just advocating for you to do that. Just be you. Ask yourself, who am I trying to please? When I talk about just being you, who are you trying to make happy? To whose hoops are you jumping through? Who are you trying to please? Because you're not going to be able to please everybody. And so sometimes you have to look at your workplace, your environment, wherever that part of your life that's causing the angst, the anxiety, and Tuesday morning, here it's going to start again. So-and-so is back to work, and I'm ready. You're almost ready for a fight. Tomorrow morning you wake up and your jaw is sore. Tuesday, your jaw is sore because you're clenching your teeth all night. Because you know it's going to start again. How can I set those fences down where I can realize, you know what, this is who I am. I can't work anymore. I can't wait. If I'm not good enough for you, then you know what? I'm doing the best I can. I have tried my very best in my personal life. I'm doing the very best that I can to be the pastor that God's called me. I'm doing the very best I can to hear from him. I can't do any more. And if this isn't enough, well then, okay, find somebody else who's better. But I can't go any more than this because I've learned to be happy and content with the way I am. That doesn't mean that I'm not trying to grow. I'm always trying to grow. But I'm not jumping to anybody else's hoops. And neither should you. Does that not make sense? And last, I want you to work for the things that matter most. Again, what about your values? What about the things that you value the most? And I would suggest to you that if you're a Christian, one of the things that you should value most in the workplace is the fact that God has strategically put you into an area or an environment where the bulk of your time, if time is the most valuable commodity, 40 to 50 hours of your entire time that is available to you is in the workplace. So that would say to me this: there are only two spiritual responsibilities that we have that is equivalent to the time that is allotted in our days. If those two places are home and work, then you have two spiritual responsibilities. Those in your home to spur on to spiritual excellence and spiritual growth. And those in the workplace, could it be that you're strategically placed to share your faith in Christ with them there? Don't worry about bringing them to church. Show them Jesus where you're there. Be a good worker. Be an honest worker. Be an integral worker. Don't be ashamed of the gospel. Be willing to share your faith. Step up. And as you share your faith and as you live your faith out, then they might be interested in hearing the gospel of Jesus Christ, because that's why you're there. That's ultimately why we're here on earth, to share this incredible good news. Does that make sense? And you and I are called to share our faith and to live out that faith. Sunday is a place to receive so that Monday you can give. I pray that when Tuesday morning hits, you'll have plenty to give. But on Monday, between Tuesday and today, I want to invite you, take some time, sit down with your family members, sit down by yourself if it's just you. Sit down with some paper and pens and say, okay, what's my life like? How do I prioritize? What are the expectations? Where should I be thankful? What needs to change? Where should the boundaries be? What do I want my life to look like so that when Tuesday hits, I'm in control, I'm in charge, and I'm doing what God has called me to do? Does that not make sense? Father, thank you that you have placed in us the responsibility that is ours. Lord, to live our lives in such a way that it is God-honoring and God-pleasing, to share our faith with those who are indifferent to the gospel and would never consider going to a church, not interested in you, but somehow may be intrigued by our lives. And by being intrigued by our lives, they want to hear what we have to say. And that somehow we can be salt and light to a lost and dying world. And Father, in the meantime, that you will help us as moms and dads, as husbands and wives, as family members, as teenagers, as children, and as family units, to examine our lives and to order it in such a way that instead of the world driving us, we drive the world. Instead of life happening to us, we make it happen in a way that is boundaried and margined and cautious and allows us to excel both in our relationships, in our spiritual development, and in our physical lives. So I pray this, Father, that we take the divine pause for Monday, and that Tuesday, whether we're a lion or whether we're a gazelle, let Tuesday come, we know we'll be running. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you.